So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. We have Andrea Likens. She is with Florida Healthcare Plans. She's one of our registered dietitians. She's also certified as a diabetes educator. And then she has been with Florida Healthcare Plans for about 6 years now. So thank you, Andrea, for doing this presentation for us. I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. So today we're going to talk about the Mediterranean style of eating. We're going to go through the different food groups. We're going to talk about examples of different meals. Right. So let's talk about why someone might be interested in learning more about the Mediterranean diet. This has been a really well-studied style of eating. It's not based off of necessarily a weight loss plan. It's based off of how people eat in the Mediterranean. And studies have shown that people that follow this diet reduce their risk of developing things like heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. So some really interesting studies have come out of this style of eating. So the Mediterranean diet has been well recommended by a lot of health professionals for a variety of different reasons. The first one is that it focuses on more natural foods, really focusing on minimally processed foods, so less packaged items, less refined grains. So think of less than 5 ingredients if it is packaged. It's flexible. A lot of diets we see now are, getting rid of entire food groups. You can't eat this food, don't eat that. This is very flexible. It includes all the different food groups. It's really about how much and how often we're having certain foods. It allows for variety. And we want this style of eating to work for you and your family, right? No one wants to have to be cooking separate meals for everyone. This is something that the whole family can enjoy. It can be lower cost as well. There's no special bars or shakes that you have to buy. It's just, fresh foods, anything that you can get at the grocery store. You don't have to go to a specialty health store to find these foods. It focuses on buying less red meat, which can definitely get expensive, refined grains, desserts, and really trying to minimize the amount of fast food we eat a month too. And of course, incorporating physical activity, a healthy lifestyle is also important. And we're going to talk about physical activity as a part of this lifestyle as well. So the first component, and probably one of the biggest parts of it, is our fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are a huge component of the Mediterranean style eating, especially your veggies. We really want to make our plate colorful, have these bright colors, especially those dark leafy green vegetables have a ton of nutrition in them. So we want to try to make at least half of our plate veggies. These might be fresh, maybe they're grilled, broiled, maybe you're putting them in the air fryer. Frozen vegetables are fine too, as long as they're not in like a heavy sauce. So trying to get lots of those veggies in, and then fruits can be great for snacks, maybe with the meal if we need a little natural sweetness. So think of trying to aim for about 2 servings a meal. Snack time is a great way to incorporate more fruits and vegetables, and it helps us reduce the amount of processed foods that we're eating as well. A lot of times snack time, we grab the chips or the cookies, but really having those fruits and vegetables around that you can grab during the day as well. Throwing veggies into your favorite dishes. Maybe it's a handful of spinach into a smoothie, which for some people, that sounds very scary, but you can't even taste it. Maybe you're throwing some veggies into your rice or pasta dish to really help bulk it up. It doesn't have to be plain, boring vegetables. We can use herbs and spices for seasoning instead of salt. We can, like I said, bake, broil, air fry, however you like to make them, as long as they're not fried or in like a heavy cream or butter. The next component of our plate is choosing whole grains. So, there's a lot of talk about carbohydrates now. Are they bad? Are they good? Really, carbohydrates includes, a huge amount of foods. It's really about choosing carbohydrates that have fiber. That's the difference between whole grain and refined grains. So that fiber helps keep us full. It helps slow down the rise of blood sugar. It helps lower cholesterol levels by sucking up cholesterol and bringing out with it. It helps in so many different ways, and most of us are not getting enough fiber. So with our grains, we want them to be whole. So 1/4 of the plate, we want to fill with whole grains. Maybe this is brown or wild rice, barley, bulgur, quinoa. They have a ton of fiber and they're going to help keep you full. If we're having breads and cereals, looking for the whole grain versions, oats are also considered a whole grain as well. If you're not sure if something is a whole grain or not, a lot of times when we're in the bread aisle, there's multigrain, there's honey wheat, there's a million different types. We want to look at the label and look at the ingredient list. We want the first word to say whole. So it'll be whole wheat, whole oat, whatever the grain may be. That's how we know if the entire grain has stayed intact. That way we're getting much more nutrition out of it. And again, that extra bonus of the fiber. All right. So a big part of the Mediterranean diet is the types of fat that we're eating. So we want to choose heart healthy fats. So we're trying to replace our solid fat. So think of butter. When we say margarine, like stick margarine has trans fat. If you're looking for a butter substitute, you can get something like Smart Balance or Promise, and they have ones that are made of olive oil. But we're really focused on extra virgin olive oil for most of our cooking and fat needs. So olive oil can be great with dressings, marinades, cooking. Olive oil is best for low heat cooking because it does have a low smoke point. So if you are cooking at a higher heat, maybe using something like an avocado oil. With our fats, think of getting our fats from plant sources and less from animal sources. So usually the intake is about 4 tablespoons fat a day. That doesn't mean that, we have to go out of our way to get more fat. This is still, a moderate fat diet. It's not low fat. Another way we can get those healthy fats in is nuts and seeds. This might be on top of our salad, or maybe we're having them as a snack, but really focusing on those heart healthy fats when we're cooking or including those nuts and seeds. This visual just kind of breaks down the different types of fat and examples of each one, because fats can get really confusing. Whether they're heart healthy fats, not heart healthy fats, they have about the same amount of calories per gram. So even healthy fats, if we're eating too much, we could still gain weight. So we still want to make sure that we're watching the portion size. But when we are having fats, the ones that we want to choose are called unsaturated fat. So unsaturated fat, there's different categories of, but in general, when we're thinking, we want to think, okay, mostly plant-based. The exception to this rule is our omega-3s. So I'm sure you guys have heard of like fish oil supplements, maybe your doctors recommended it, and that's because of those omega-3 fatty acids. Cold water fatty fish are going to be really high in omega-3s, like your salmon, mackerel, albacore tuna. They're very heart healthy. They can help with triglyceride levels. They're anti-inflammatory. If you don't like fish, the Mediterranean diet is a little tricky because it really emphasizes fish, but we can also get omega through some plant-based sources as well, including English walnuts, flax seeds, or maybe a supplement. Now, unsaturated fats, the ones that we're really looking for are called monounsaturated. So monounsaturated fats are the most recommended because not only do they help lower your bad LDL cholesterol, but they also help increase your good HDL cholesterol. So that's why olive oil is really recommended there. We also have something called omega-6s. These are going to be more of your polyunsaturated fats. They're not bad. They're not going to increase your LDL cholesterol, but they're pretty neutral with our good cholesterol. So they're not going to help increase it. So that's why we really want to focus on those monounsaturated fats, because they're not only going to help lower LDL cholesterol, but also raise your HDL. Now, saturated fat over here, this is the one we're really trying to limit and is very low in the Mediterranean diet. So saturated fat mostly comes from animal sources. So we have our high-fat meat, butter, cheese, and then, of course, things like lard to try to reduce. The exception to the rule in saturated fat is coconut and palm oil. Even though they do come from plant sources, they are considered a saturated fat. So we just want to watch the portion size. Again, with the Mediterranean diet, it doesn't mean that you can never have these foods again. We're just watching how much and how often. The last one on this end of the scale is trans fat. Trans fat isn't naturally really in the food supply. And now that we know how bad it is for us, there's not a whole lot out there anymore anyways. But if you do see trans fat on the label, like the picture has here, we always want that number to be 0. Trans fat has been found to increase cholesterol levels, to stiffen arteries. We really don't want any of it in our diet. But like I said, now that we know how bad it is for us, less and less foods have them in it. So this is a nice little visual of going from benefits to harm and how we should kind of choose our fats. With the fat also comes protein. So a lot of people are getting saturated fat from their protein sources. And one big component of the Mediterranean style of eating is what type of protein that we're getting. And this really cuts down on the amount of saturated fat that we're having. It also has smaller portions of meat. It still has high protein foods, but we don't need a ton of it. So you're filling about 1/4 of your plate with skinless chicken, turkey, and really focusing on seafood. They recommend seafood at least 3 times a week. Bonus points if it's those fatty cold water fish like your mackerel or salmon. So for beef or pork, again, it doesn't mean you can never have it. We just want to limit it to, special occasions, really preparing all meats in lower fat cooking methods like grilling, baking, broiling, and watching out for those processed meats. Vegetarian meals are also encouraged in the Mediterranean diet. Maybe we're having a meatless Monday and using things like beans or legumes or tofu for your protein source instead of an animal protein. And then the last component of the Mediterranean diet, of course, is physical activity, which is important for, just general overall health as well. The recommendation for physical activity is trying to get at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity a week. So moderate intensity means that we're walking, biking, whatever it may be, fast enough where we're getting our heart rate up a little and breathing a little faster. A good way of measuring this is called the talk test. So moderate intensity activity means that if you're walking, you could still talk without being really out of breath, but if you tried to sing, it'd be difficult. So that's a good way to measure if you're walking fast enough. A lot of people, when we have our appointments, go, oh yeah, I'm really active. I'm at the store. I'm picking up my kids. I'm all over the place. But really, we want that sustained physical activity where, if we're doing that in the grocery store, it might look like we're sprinting around, but we want to make sure we're walking fast enough that we're getting our heart rate up to really get those cardiovascular benefits. So that 150 minutes a week breaks down into about 30 minutes, 5 days a week, or you can break it up for whatever works for your day. Maybe one day it's 10 minutes, maybe another day it's an hour. Break it up for whatever works for you. But at the end of the week, we want to try to get up to at least 150 minutes a week. So this is just a nice visual breaking down the different components and what we should be focusing on. So your red meats and sweets, enjoying sparingly. These are more of our, treat foods to enjoy occasionally. Your poultry, eggs, and dairy are still allowed, but maybe we're having them 1 to 2 times a week. Most of our protein, we want to come from fish, seafood, omega-3 rich foods, more than about 3 times a week. And then every day we want to include whole grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, and herbs and spices. So say your doctor has said, you have high blood pressure, we want to reduce the amount of sodium we're having. A lot of times that's a hard transition because most of the seasoning we use has salt. So looking for herbs and spices that are sodium free to help flavor that food without getting the extra sodium. If you're not sure where to start with that, Mrs. Dash can be a great place because they have different blends, and you don't have to do too much guesswork with it. And then, of course, our physical activity and also meal and family time is super important. Connecting with others, being active, staying connected while we're eating, being mindful, all of that are important practices as well. So this is a nice little visual kind of going over the things that we're trying to limit. And, notice we're not saying never have, don't have these foods. It's rarely or never. But what we're trying to limit to 2 to 3 times per month is red meat. So we can still have them, but when we are having red meats, really focusing on the leaner cuts so that they're not going to be super high in saturated fat. Our sugar sweetened beverages, no more than 3 servings a week. Your stick butter, stick margarine, rarely or never, fast food, rare, and highly processed foods, rarely. So just really focusing on those whole, minimally processed foods. So how do we put this all together? Let's go through some examples of breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks that you could incorporate into your day to eat more Mediterranean. So for breakfast, most mornings, maybe we're having a whole grain like oatmeal and fruit or whole grain bread, maybe a low-fat yogurt with berries. We really want to focus on whole fruit instead of fruit juice because with the juice, it does take away the fiber. And fiber is that great component of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains that we're looking for. The whole fruit is also just going to help fill us up more and be more satisfying. Maybe 3 to 4 mornings a week, we're doing eggs, experiment with poached eggs over whole wheat toast, or maybe we're doing beans with a low-fat cheese to get that extra fiber. And then things that we're trying to limit are things like our higher fat breakfast meats like sausages. So maybe we're having a whole grain waffle with bacon or eggs, trying a lower fat like turkey sausage instead to help reduce the amount of fat. Lunch. So on most days, we really want to focus on the veggies. Maybe we're trying different types of salads, including black beans or chickpeas for that extra fiber. They also contain protein as well. So if you're doing a meatless meal, maybe adding some beans or chickpeas for your protein, adding shrimp or salmon, using olive oil-based dressings, doing olive oil and vinegar to help make a salad dressing more interesting. And then we're snacking on fruits, nuts, and veggies for our snack. A couple times a week, maybe we're having chicken and turkey. We could have a sandwich on a whole wheat bread and then adding some veggies to it. For our fat, maybe we're using an avocado as our heart-healthy fat. For a snack, we can have low-fat cottage cheese with fruit. And then trying to limit to a couple times a month. Is it allowed to order that hamburger you've been craving? Sure. Again, it's all about how much and how often. Maybe we're substituting fruit or a salad for the fries to help cut down on the fat while we're enjoying the burger. For dessert, maybe we're having an angel food cake with fresh fruit or frozen fruit and maybe a low-fat yogurt. And dinner, very similar, focusing on those veggies. We can have them steamed, roasted, sauteed with olive oil, herbs, and spices, adding beans, lentils, brown rice, whole grain pasta. A couple times a week, we were doing the chicken. And then a couple times a month, we're having maybe a leaner red meat like roast beef, lamb chop, pork tenderloin, and then still including those whole grains like barley and lots of veggies. For dessert, maybe to mix it up a little bit, having a fruit-based dessert like a low-sugar cobbler or berries with a low-fat topping. So this includes so many different types of food. All of this is going to be very filling because of the fiber. We're having those healthy fats. This is very similar to what we went over, but I know we're approaching 12:30, so we'll go to the snacks. So some snack ideas that follow the Mediterranean diet. We were having some nuts, a piece of fruit, veggies with hummus, a cup of berries, Greek yogurt, a hard-boiled egg with salt and pepper, apple slices with almond butter, bell peppers and guacamole, cottage cheese and fruit, chia pudding. So there's so many different options to really help move us more to that Mediterranean style of eating. And we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. There was a question on the chat. How about adding honey on plain yogurt and fruit or nuts? Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, so you can add honey. Honey is still considered an added sugar, but if you're already getting a plain variety, you can add a little bit of honey for that natural sugar, and then maybe some berries, which are going to be higher in fiber, just watching the amount of honey that you're adding.
All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Andrea, if you'll just go to the next slide for me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. If you have any questions, or you want more information, you can reach out to us at wellness@fhcp.com. We have recorded the webinar, so once it's ready, we will make that available. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and thank you, Andrea, for all the wonderful information.
Thank you.